Before we begin the episode, I wanted to let you know that we created a Patreon for Developer Dialogue. We felt this would be a good way to measure if you and the community want us to continue making new episodes. You can sign up for as little as $1 a month, so if you'd like to see more Developer Dialogue interviews, let us know through our Patreon, or if you don't want to contribute in that manner, you could also leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Now, on to the episode. Welcome everyone to Developer Dialogue, a podcast devoted to discussing games with innovative developers. I'm your host, Jean, also known as Strategy Wargamer. Today in our 19th episode, we are discussing Crusader Kings 3 with Alexander Oltner of the legendary Paradox Development Studio. Welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Hello, thank you. Happy to be here.
I appreciate you coming on this show. This is, like I said before, it's an honor. It's the game director of CK3, of Crusader Kings 3. This is pretty huge for me.
I'm just a fan. I'm just a really, really big fan of the game, and that's why I work on it, right? I'm a big fan, just like you seem to be.
I'm kind of curious. So, usually the first question I usually ask is, what inspired you to kind of go into the gaming industry? What was your inspiration to kind of dive into this industry?
How deep do you want me to go into this? Just to start from the beginning, I was always a huge nerd, right? Playing lots of games, and I lived out in the countryside, but being allergic to everything, I stayed inside and played games. Then I went into gaming school, and eventually, when I was finished, I wound up at DICE, another Swedish developer that makes the Battlefield games. Worked there for a few years, and realized that in my free time, I was doing a lot of Paradox modding. And I thought to myself, why not work with this instead of doing it just for fun? So I applied to Paradox, and I got into Paradox. And after I started as QA, became designer after a few years, and eventually game director. And all throughout, I've only worked on CK. Started on CK2 and now on CK3.
Oh, wow. What kind of mods did you work on? I'm kind of curious.
Just for my own consumption, really. Tweaks, and I've always been inclined to dive really deep into the mechanics of a game. Which made me a fantastic QA, and it also translated into, design. It was applicable for the design role as well, knowing every number and what they do and why they are important to the player makes for good foundations when you're designing.
Is this, I'm kind of curious, is this the first game that at Paradox that you're game director?
Yeah, officially in any capacity. Officially game director on CK3, though I did handle CK2 for a short while in essentially the capacity of a game director. Towards the end, very end.
Oh, okay. I usually do this with pretty much most developers that come on. I don't know anyone who hasn't heard of Crusader Kings, but I guess for the few that are maybe out there, can you give us a quick elevator pitch of Crusader Kings 3?
No, absolutely. So imagine essentially a big medieval soap opera meets a grand strategy game on the map. It's full of drama, it's full of intrigue, and it's all connected by the map and the realms on the map and the historical setting. Marrying everything. It's an emergent storyteller that creates narratives different from game to game. You will never see two games being similar. It's an endless story generator.
Yeah, I love the way that you kind of described that with that analogy. That was really good. I'm gonna have to use that. One other question that I had that was rattling around in my head was, at its height, how big was the CK3 team during development?
Oh my goodness. So I don't have I don't remember really. It's so long ago now. Large. I don't remember any numbers, but I can probably say the largest team we have had until that point in Paradox. I think we previously hadn't ever had a team that large as during the CK3 development, towards the end at least. Of course, like every project, things ramp up over time, but towards the end it was a very big team, lots of people.
Were you guys like in the hundreds?
No. We're not even in the hundreds now, and we're still going up in number.
Oh, wow.
No, I don't remember exactly, but probably like over 30, between 30 and 50. I don't know. Something like that.
Oh, wow.
And there's a lot of peripheral functions, right? So there's always more than you think of.
My other question would be, how long was CK3 in development from like start from concept to release?
Oh, I wasn't there for the inception. Henrik Fåhraeus, the previous game director, now creative director, was the one who drove it from the very start. I believe it was around 5 years, maybe.
Oh, wow.
From early, first draft on paper. Probably even earlier than that, actually, first draft on paper. But it's had a dev team like actively working on it for roughly 5 years. I came in and became the game director in the middle of, or towards the end of development, rather. I haven't been here for the entire development of the base game, but I have been on most of it.
Okay. So one thing that so when I first started up like CK3, once the game launched, I noticed something like the engine, the animations, the zooming, everything seemed super fluid. And I have like a lower mid-range graphics card, and the one question that popped up in my head is like, how did you guys make the game like so like full of just that beautiful design that you have and all that graphics run on less power? I mean, not the most powerful hardware. How did you guys make that possible? It was always like kind of like it perplexed me.
I'm happy to hear that. We set the minimum spec. I'm not sure if what you played on was below the minimum spec or not, but we tested things against this machine with the lowest possible setup, just to make sure that everything worked as it should. We added in a bunch of options to make sure lower end machines could do things such as turn off animations, advanced shader effects, and such things that we identified could help people play the game on as many machines as possible, within reason, of course.
Yeah, I was surprised because mine's I think it's a AMD 570X, and I think your minimum was I think it's a Radeon 7000 series, and yeah, I was kind of surprised. Like I was playing on high graphics, and it was just butterly smooth, and I was just kind of surprised by that. So thank you for that.
I'm happy to hear it, because that sounds like it's below minimum spec, but I'm happy to hear it.
So before I go any further, I need to mention to you and the audience, I'm quite a bit of a noob when it comes to Crusader Kings. CK3 was really like the first game that I really spent a great deal of time in terms of gameplay. And I guess the reason for that is like that whole time period with like vassals and courts and counts was always a bit confusing to me. But for some reason, and maybe you can explain it to me because I'm still trying to work with this, CK3 felt much easier to kind of dive into and understand. Like I started the game up, and it was just usually when I did CK2, I noticed like I couldn't like get used to it as quickly as I did with CK3. So what kind of magic did you guys work there? Because it seems like you guys made the game easier to kind of understand and kind of play.
From your description, I would say there are two things we did. One thing is, CK2 suffers from something we call old paradox UI syndrome. which is essentially no focus on accessibility whatsoever. Everything is hidden in a menu. You do not know what information is relevant to you at any point. We worked a lot on this for CK3, making sure that you see what you need to see, when you need to see it, that you can get information when you need it, without pushing it into your face necessarily. Lots of things such as game concepts help you understand what things mean. We have tooltips that break down into more detailed tooltips rather than cramming everything in the same UI. I think that's probably the main reason why the game is easier to get into now. But then, judging by what you said, it's also the presentation. Like the fact that we have 3D portraits, map looks nicer, the UIs have sound and animations, and things don't feel as clunky anymore. It makes it more inviting. You sort of want to spend time investigating what does this mean, and how does it affect me when you actually see a character reacting to you or something changing on the map.
Yeah, I feel like that's a great way to put it, because as you were saying that, I was kind of connecting the dots, and that's totally true. Like everything seemed it wasn't overwhelming, I guess for me. So I was able to just I guess it came in really nice bite-sized chunks that I was able to kind of like slowly learn more and more without it being too overwhelming, and being kind of like, okay, I need to take a step back and maybe go through the tutorial. But with this one, I skipped the tutorial and I just went into picking up the game, and I was really kind of surprised because I think within like the first hour, I kind of like understood where everything was going, how everything worked, and that's first for me on CK. With your newest releases with like CK and Heart to Iron, are you guys kind of like keeping that in mind in terms of making it much more less intimidating to new players?
Yes, of course. An important point to make here is that we do not want to dumb down our games. That's the one thing no one wants to do in the game director layer, or in any layer really at the company. However, there's a difference between complexity and something being complicated. So we're trying to keep the complexity. We keep the complexity, but we try to make everything less complicated. It shouldn't be a chore to do something that is good for you, for example. It should be intuitive and easy. Primarily, we try to achieve this by making the UX better, or the presentation better, or give you the tools you need to effectively perform the tasks you want to perform, rather than changing the design or dumbing things down. We try to avoid that as much as we can. Of course, there's also something like needless complexity. Like a game like Crusader Kings has its focus on characters, the drama, and the world evolving over time. So certain things don't make sense for Crusader Kings, such as detailed population management, for example. That's the domain of Victoria. So we keep things in mind. We try to make we find the best systems for each game, and then we try to make them presentable and intuitive to use without reducing complexity.
I can imagine it's like a huge design challenge to kind of make all those systems work together.
Absolutely. We have several competent designers and UX designers even that work together to make sure that features come alive in as good a way as possible. Because it's so easy to just, as a designer, write down it should be a button somewhere. But it's not the best way of going about it. Rather, you should write, what do I intend the player to use this feature for? And then we work together and we find out that maybe a button isn't the best way. Maybe it should be presented in some other way or somewhere else.
Oh, wow.
And the game is much better for it.
So you guys have an upcoming expansion that you just announced at PDXCon, and it's called Royal Court. Can you tell us what to expect in this first big addition to this game?
Of course. So there's quite a lot in the expansion. You have the namesake, the royal court itself. Every king and every emperor that is non-tribal, or rather that is feudal or clan, will have access to this royal court view, where they have an actual 3D scene, characters placed, including themselves. They can collect interesting characters and artifacts in their court, put them on the wall or on pedestals, and manipulate a resource, or well, not a resource actually, but rather a balancing act called grandeur, that affects your political standing and what you can do, your prestige, and so on. That is one part of the expansion. And then, of course, we're reintroducing the inventory, both the personal one and the court one I mentioned earlier. So your character can wield a sword, and in your court you can have a tapestry, for example. There's lots of small things that tie into the court as well. The other really big one that doesn't have to do with the court is the culture rework, where we're doing a massive rework of how cultures work foundationally, which is going to be free in the patch.
Oh, wow.
Where we make them based on pillars and ethoses and have traditions that expose what cultures do well. This is an example of what I mentioned before with making sure things are exposed and intuitive. Cultures had a lot of magic to them. There was nothing that told you that the Anglo-Saxon culture had their special elective government, for example. They could have the Vitengamot. But now it's on a tradition, so it's exposed to the player. So you know why they have access to the things they have access to. Everything is exposed and visible. And then the big thing that's coming in the expansion is, of course, dynamic cultures. Being able to diverge and hybridize your cultures, which is something I love personally. It's something I've wanted in Crusader Kings since I started working on Crusader Kings. You can have these amazing, cool hybrids popping up. Both the really historical ones, such as Turco-Persian or Turco-Iranian.
Oh, wow.
And, of course, the regular Crusader Kings craziness, where you have, I don't know, like steppe people taking over France and creating some Franco-Chimek hybrid culture, which happened in one of my games recently.
Oh, wow.
Like complete insanity sometimes. And there's much more. I mean, we have court positions. You can give characters roles in your court, and they provide you with actual benefits in exchange for a salary. And I mean, there's much more really. It will be covered in dev diaries in the upcoming months.
One thing that you mentioned was the throne room, and that it's going to be 3D. How is that going to be presented to the player? Is it actual, like when you click a button, it's going to go into like a 3D virtual like throne room kind of thing?
Yes, it's you can think about it as the bridge between the map and the character. You have things happening in your throne room between you and your courtiers, or just between your courtiers. As I mentioned, you have the grandeur in there, and you also have your artifacts, which you can admire. But there's also characters doing things in there. So you have events happening in your court. So you have a reason to go and check it out now and then, because there might be something interesting going on. Some people are fighting, or whatever have you. And they will also be in the view itself. So you can see them standing next to each other and chatting.
Wow. That seems to be like... That seems to be like a huge addition to the game. I mean, how are you guys tackling that? That seems to be like a massive addition.
Oh, we're tackling it with what's the best word to use? We're treating it seriously. We're putting a lot of time into it. We are making sure we get everything right, thinking about performance and how it looks, etc. It's challenging, of course, but it's getting there. You probably saw the screenshot we put in
Oh yeah.
the dev diary, and since then it's become even better.
Yeah, when you guys had the trailer, I thought that was just kind of like kind of like a teaser of not like I didn't think it was actually going to be like a physical representation of an actual throne room. That's really impressive. So really can't wait to check that out. That's going to be amazing.
Yeah, we're designing this expansion to appeal to the Crusader Kings player base in a very broad sense, because we have, of course, there's a big overlap between these two groups. So don't think that there are two separate groups. Most of them have a big overlap, but there's the very role play focused group, and the Royal Court feature is really, it deepens the role-playing aspect with you seeing yourself on your throne. There's nothing more kingly than actually sitting on your throne and ruling, seeing your subjects and your items and everything you've collected around you. While the culture system and the dynamism of that appeals very much to the players that like to see the world evolve over time and see interesting history play out in the span of hundreds of years, rather than, temporary, here and now in my court, I am the king this year. It's an evolution that sticks with the game.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm really looking forward to that. One thing that kind of stuck out for me when I saw it was, I guess two things. One was the bear. So I have to ask, is it possible that subjects or guests can actually be killed in the throne room?
Just first, to make it very clear, the trailer is not in-game footage, so don't believe it is in-game footage. It's a trailer. As for courtiers dying, yes, of course, they can die in the court. There can be courtiers killing each other's or murder attempts. Who knows?
Wow. Okay, that's gonna be incredible.
Yeah, and just a disclaimer: no, we will not have any actual animated bear models in the court. No animals in the court. That will come at some other point, maybe.
No animals have been harmed in this trailer. I guess one of the things that I wanted to ask you was because I always talk to my friends and to colleagues about CK and some of the most outrageous things they've seen. I wanted to ask you, what was some of the most outrageous events or outcomes that you've seen in CK3 or even in CK2?
Oh, there's too much to say. There's too much. I have so many stories. You have to be specific, like maybe during the development of Royal Court or during CK2. I mean, I've seen so much.
I guess let's stick with Royal Court.
Oh, yes. Just this morning I inspected one of my overnights and realized that so a family of West African nobles had been displaced from their homes and slowly wandered across the world until they reached the Tarim Basin, which is above Tibet.
Oh, wow.
Where they had gained land somehow. So they had ruled the little county called Khotan, I think, or Kashgar, one of the two, for a few generations, until they had been elevated to dukes. And then the Mongols came and made them kings. And then they had formed this hybrid culture in the Tarim Basin between the West African, I think, Wolof culture and the local culture. And it was such an impressive dynamic emergence. Like, it took so much for that to happen. And I like it when the game blows my mind like that.
Yeah, that's incredible. That definitely tops my list. A friend of mine, I guess the next one that I heard was that most outrageous was a friend of mine had like took over not Poland, but had basically his family throughout Poland and in all the counties, and had a big kingdom. And then the Mongols came over and killed his entire family, like everybody in Poland. And he was left with one family member that was in Ireland. And when he explained it to me, I just thought that was just remarkable. But I was able to still continue the game because he had that one family member still in Ireland.
Ah, that's so cool. When when you lose your family and suddenly you have to adapt to another branch, that's the best. Usually you haven't had any control over their educations or anything, so you have these really strange kings or queens coming in all in a row. I love that stuff.
Yeah, I was really surprised. Like the main thing that he was kind of pushing was like, that he wasn't out of the game, that he could reconquer, like he can go and take over Ireland and then come back into the game and face the Mongols later on. I thought that was really remarkable because generally, when you're I'm used to like Victoria or when your country falls, it falls. That's it. You're done.
I can tell you the story of. The very time I became addicted to Crusader Kings, back in Crusader Kings 2. Very similar story in a sense that I liked looking at a game, just unpausing and looking at what happened, but I didn't know how to play it. So I decided I'll play someone who doesn't have to do anything, just so I can look at the game. I played an Irish count, and I didn't really know what I was doing. I was marrying some people and not thinking much about it. And then after a while, I suddenly inherit the kingdom of the Netherlands, like the entire thing, or the kingdom of Frisia. So suddenly I'm this big ruler, and I'm a queen, and I have no heir. And I'm like, oh no, I need to solve this situation somehow. So I, started murdering all of my children to make sure I had a child with my dynasty so I could continue playing. And then I just kept playing the game. So it's sort of, I went into the game thinking, I won't do anything. I just want to look at it. And then I was thrust into this situation where a looming game over would mean I couldn't watch it anymore. So I had to solve it. Like, how do I solve this succession? Then I kept playing. And then I kept playing forever, essentially, until now.
Yeah, I always get I guess that's the genius of CK is like I was playing the last game my last game that I was playing was I had this little county, and my brother ran I forgot the larger Wessex, and the Vikings killed him. And automatically I inherited everything, and it was just really remarkable because I was kind of like planning for like months, and like, how do I inherit all of Wessex? Maybe I can kill him, or maybe and I was planning it, and then he just died in battle, and I was like, oh. This is awesome.
That's great.
Yeah, it's amazing. I really like that soap opera reference that you mentioned is perfect. It's almost like watching a long movie or a TV series kind of thing.
Yeah, I had a real drama moment when I played last weekend. I was playing in the Tarim Basin again, funnily enough, and my realm split in two. I was having a really tough time. There were enemies everywhere. And then suddenly my brother's vassal started a faction for putting me on the throne on his dukedom.
Oh, wow.
I'm like, oh, cool, thank you for this. And I helped them out in the war and everything. And then I thanked the vassal, which was devious and deceitful, by throwing him into prison and executing him for high treason against my brother. Can't leave any loose ends,
Yeah. I guess my next question would be So when you were mentioning the royal court, I was kind of curious because when I was kind of looking at it and that you can fill your court with better food and trappings. It said that it was gonna be able to impress my rivals and my guests. Would I be able to develop my relationships with people that I guess don't like me so much with this better food and these trappings?
It all feeds into the same system. It's the grandeur system, which is this sort of, well, medieval version of filling your garage with expensive cars and pouring champagne on the grass, right? That's sort of what it is. How impressive your realm is. And this all helps you gain opinion with, foreign rulers and your guests and your vassals. Amenities, what you're mentioning here, is a part of it. It's, of course, spending more on food or something will increase your grandeur. It also costs a lot. Amenities are there as your way of gaining grandeur. You can always spend more on amenities. They're always there and available. But another source of grandeur is your court artifacts. So over time you will build up court artifacts, which technically mean you could spend less on amenities and save money that way, but it's a long-term thing. And if you spend on amenities, they have specific effects and modifiers. Some of them increase guest opinion, some of them make your guests fatter, for example. And they tie into content, such as the events you find in your court, the court events. They can be influenced by your amenities. Like if you spend a lot of money on food, you might find courtiers eating, mouthful after mouthful of food in an event, praising your name for the lovely delicacies you're bringing them. I mean, unfortunately, we do not have any eating animations in the court, but it's there in spirit, right? You see them cheering and praising your name.
So another question I have to ask is, because I just found out from also a friend of mine something kind of outrageous was, and really impressive, was the amount of time that he invests in CK. So I wanted to ask you, what was the highest amount of time you ever seen a player invest in Crusader Kings? Aside from like a developer, like what's the highest amount of time you ever heard of a player investing in Crusader Kings?
Oh, I think this is way back in the day. I don't remember the story exactly, but it was someone who had to spend a lot of time in hospital for some reason, like years. And they had spent so much time in Crusader Kings, like 6,000 to 8,000 hours, 10,000 hours, I think, even more. And they contacted us saying that they loved the game and thanked us for all we had done. I believe at least that was it. And I think 10,000 hours is the highest amount of time I've heard someone spend. Again, this is a long time ago, so I might be misremembering. But I mean, people are bragging about having 1,000 to 2,000 hours all the time.
Yeah, that definitely beat out the figure that I heard. Recently, my friend mentioned that he had 6,000 in CK2, and I think he's at 2,000 for CK3, and it just dropped my jaw, and I was just incredibly impressed by that because he is in the Navy, and I'm like, how do you find time? I mean, I'm trying to find as much time as I can get, and so it was just kind of remarkable. So yeah, 10,000 definitely beats his 6,000.
I mean, I am so humbled by the fact that people want to spend this amount of time in our games. It's so humbling, right? I know that you can get lots of entertainment out of them, and I mean, I myself have like 4,000 hours in Crusader Kings 2, most of which is active play. But I mean, it still blows my mind, like, that people want to spend so much time in the game, and I love it. It's so great.
I guess my last question would be, what is your favorite time period and realm to play that you always find yourself kind of going to?
In Crusader Kings, that would... No, I don't think I have one, right? I do not have a place I play more often than not. I vary. I play everywhere, and I play for every reason in every time frame. I I'm the kind of player that goes into the game with no particular goal in mind, rather than letting the story unfold most of the time. Sometimes I have a goal, like I want to create a big empire, or I feel like this small culture should be big. I'll try and make it big. But really, I just enjoy the stories that comes out. And I mean, last time I played in the Tarim Basin, I guess it's easier to say what I usually do not play. I never start as a king, for example. I always start as a count or a duke somewhere, because I think that's the essence of Crusader Kings, is climbing your way to the top, and starting at the top is not interesting to me.
Wow, okay. I like that. I always find myself going into England for some reason. I don't know why, but I literally 9 times out of 10 always play England. So I was kind of curious what your favorite was, but that's really cool. I like that. I guess that's all the questions that I have. Is there anything that I missed that you would like to cover?
I mean, nothing in particular. Do you have any more questions? I'm happy to answer a few more if you have any.
I guess one question that has been on my mind, and I did want to ask you. So I've noticed a lot of the gaming industry kind of going into more of games as a service, kind of like the Xbox Game Pass, things like that. And I was just kind of curious. I really love that Paradox, makes DLCs, and if you want to, if this DLC appeals to you, you can purchase it, and if you don't, you still get like you were mentioning, Cultural Divergence as a free patch, and you guys do that on Hearts of Iron and all, pretty much every game that you guys make. I was just kind of curious. Do you guys plan to continue that, or are you going to plan over the course of the years kind of going into more of like a service kind of model?
I can't really say if we will or will not. But Crusader Kings as a series, starting with CK2, explored new ways of delivering content. CK2 tried... Well, it was the first Paradox game with a DLC, if I'm not mistaken, rather than a full expansion, smaller DLCs. And as the market keeps evolving, of course, we have to look at what we should do to give the players what they need. But there are no explicit plans, like going to a live service model or something. There are no such plans. For now, we're aiming to release expansions, as we've done before. But there's no telling what the future holds.
That's great to hear. I really love that. And I really love the way you guys kind of released that. And I guess my last question would be, I'm a huge, I would say, Linux Mac kind of guy. And I was just kind of curious, how much effort, because I noticed you guys, CK3 as well as many other games are available on these platforms that don't have significant market share. Like Mac, I think, is around 10%, Linux is 1% or less. How difficult is it to get these big games to work on these operating systems? That does it require a great deal of extra work to do that, or how does that work out?
I'm not gonna lie and say that it's easy, especially seeing as when it comes to Mac and Linux, things change sometimes, and then it's on us to adapt rather than the other way around. So it takes quite a bit of effort to make sure that things run, and we always have we have to solve all the problems with cross-platform multiplayer, for example, and the fact that they handle graphics differently. etc. It takes some time, but we do invest quite a bit of time into making sure that it runs decently.
And I really appreciate that because, I'm one of those people that is in that, 1% and 10%. So thank you for that, and thank you to your team for doing that for our small minority over here that does that.
Yeah, no worries.
So thank you for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. And thank you for everything that you guys do. It's very appreciative. I know the whole community loves, every, release that you guys make, especially this upcoming one that I can't wait to get my hands on. So thank you, and hopefully we can have you on again once Royal Court comes out. And and thank you for that.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you for having me.